Hey, I'm Rebecca, and I am an out entrepreneur.
Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to this week's episode of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. And on this week's episode, we are welcoming Rebecca Channer, who's joining us in our Portland studios. So, Rebecca, are you ready to inspire fellow out entrepreneurs?
I cannot wait.
Yes. Well, I'm really excited to have you here. Just a little bit about Rebecca. She is the founder and CEO of PropsperCity, a business born from her imagination in response to growing evidence that pay discrimination and disparity still exist in most workplaces. Having endured adversity, trauma, and significant stress during her childhood and young adult years, Rebecca funneled these early learning opportunities into her work as an advocate, activist, teacher, manager, director, and eventual social entrepreneur.
Woo!
So she believes that resilience is the secret ingredient that increases the surface area of one's heart. I love that. I mean, your bio is awesome. There's a lot more to it. So why don't you kind of kick us off and just tell us a little bit more about PropsperCity and what makes it unique?
Sure. Well, first of all, Rhodes, thank you so much for having me. I am your super fan.
I feel the same way about you. So this is going to be awesome. We're simpatico.
The best. PropsperCity is this amazing, interesting, rad, new job board that is really dedicated to advancing equity, diversity, and inclusion in the workplace. The idea is that prosperity begins with equity. And so what we're interested in doing is dismantling some of the barriers that get in the way of us being able to have workplaces that feel inclusive and equitable and are diverse. And for us, that there's a very simple barrier up front, and that it revolves around pay and salary transparency. And so we just thought it was a logical evolution of our culture and of our workplaces, if we truly do want to become more equitable and diverse and inclusive, that we start being more open about salary and compensation and pay transparency. What a simple, easy way to do that would be to start including that information at the starting gate of a hiring process, right?
Yes.
So we are the first job board in the nation where every single position that's posted on our site openly discloses the salary and pay information, as well as additional compensation benefits. We're also giving employers an opportunity to showcase other great things that they're doing around their workplace environments, whether they're a benefit corporation, what their sustainability practices are, really all of that good stuff, links to their policies and procedures. Yeah, it's an opportunity both to really be that company who cares, and to create a space also for job seekers where they're starting the relationship off, right, with these potential employers on the right foot from trust and openness and transparency. So.
Yeah, I love what you're doing, and I know we've talked a lot about this offline. Can you talk a little bit more about what was kind of pushing you to really start this? You know, you had mentioned that this is the first job board, which is unbelievable, right?
Right.
That is like every position, give us something, a pay scale or something, and you saw that this was a huge gap, but like, what was the final push for you where you're like, I have to do this? Yeah,
I mean, I've spent the last 20 years or so, I can't believe it's been that long, in the nonprofit, predominantly in the nonprofit sector. As my career elevated, and for the last 9 to 10 years, I've been having opportunities both as an executive director as well as a consultant, really seeing through these hiring processes where not being transparent and open about that information becomes a huge hurdle frankly, for everyone, including the organization or the company and the HR managers. When you get to that third round interview and you're finally talking about salary and, it turns out that that individual can't afford to work for that price, that the passion is not all enough, that they actually need a salary to support their household and their family too. Just the amount of wasted time, the wasted effort, and then just the awkwardness of those conversations, and really ultimately just feeling like people were starting their jobs feeling out of step a bit with their employers because it was also kind of strange and secret and coy and just not that spirit of like the workplace culture we want to be a part of. And so I was, I just really wanted to put in action my business mind also and my entrepreneurial skills and come up with a solution. That was, where I saw the problem. And then where it started to unfold is a whole nother story.
We'll get there. And as you were talking, I'm thinking about that awkward conversation that comes deep into the interview process, right? And Also, you've consulted in the past, right? And so many organizations, I'm sure will come to you to say, hey, we need someone to do strategic planning. Give us a quote. Like that's the first thing that an employer, an organization will say. And yet when they're considering people to be employees, it's like that's the last thing that they want to talk about. So it kind of feels like you're creating some kind of, not that it's like a labor union of some sort, but you are creating some kind of power dynamic just to counter some of that bad behavior that I think some employers engage in, where it's those kind of coy conversations, or maybe it's this fear to talk about compensation, right?
Well, that's the big thing, right? Is that what we have after decades and decades of more secret style workplace environments, and that we're often, especially in the corporate sector, predominantly white men. We're in the senior management positions and CEO and board positions, that we have a lot of disparity now in salaries. And we have, generations of women sitting at the negotiating table and not negotiating. I actually know for certain that still happens today.
Totally.
They get an offer and they just say yes. Yeah. Whereas a man is generally socially coached to go back and say, I demand more, or I want more, I deserve more, I'm worth more.
Yeah.
If you come in and you're in your 20s when you are starting, that's your initial salary, right? Yeah. Where you will be 20 or 30 years from now, that gap, because of where that man started and where that woman started, for instance, or a person of color, there's a lot of different situations happening here, can be just unbelievable. And so you end up with these gender wage gaps, and you end up with inequality in the workplace. And so now nobody wants to talk about it. Yeah. And so if we start talking about it transparently at the beginning, we have to wrestle with the reality that we might need to deal with this also internally with pre-existing issues around transparency. Yeah. So in addition to the job board that we have created and recently launched, we're building out a consulting or a coaching arm also, so that we can actually take some of these larger corporations, honor where they're at, recognize the work that needs to be done, and work alongside them to get to that place where they can be transparent. We know you can't just flip a switch on this stuff. So
Totally. So I imagine for the job applicants, there's probably many people already like, where do we sign up? Where can we start searching for jobs, right? And you're probably getting inundated, right? What's the carrot to bring in those employers that, they're patting themselves on the back because they're very committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, at least lip service wise. This is kind of the rubber is hitting the road, right? And this is about, we want to see action. And one piece of action is when you're recruiting folks, be a little more transparent, at least throw a number on the table, right? How do you bring them in and how do you bring them along just to get them to really understand the vision of what you're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we're obviously, it's a different method for different companies, right? Some people are really rooted in their values around equity and inclusion. And they also really see the value of a diverse workforce. Those are the easy sells, right? They're already on the path. Fundamentally, it's a time saver to be open and transparent. It sets that relationship off on the right foot. It stops early the potential for so many other issues to arise later in an employee's experience with the company. Yeah. So, money and time is one thing. You also just get to contribute to making more equitable workplaces, which there's enough research out there these days that show a diverse workforce, a happy workforce, a culturally thoughtful workforce. Like these are all things that actually increase productivity. So the bottom line, it helps with that too.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes you have to be a little more patient for those employers that don't quite they're not connecting those dots, right?
Yes. Patience is a good word for it. Exactly. We have to flex our empathy muscles and understand that there's a lot of history here. So the parts of me that are interested in economic justice and fairness and equality, those feathers get ruffled quite often. But to be really effective in these environments, it's important to me to see really where people are at and then to help them move forward from that space. In our culture these days, shame is a method. It's not my method. I really don't believe ultimately that great change stems from shaming people or companies or the leaders or white men or whatever it is, that we can be graceful in this process and we can talk about these issues and we can honor where we're at and then keep the conversation moving forward.
I love that. I think that's a good reminder that we can be graceful in the process, and I like your approach. So I guess I'm biased, so there you have it. When I was reading through your bio, there were many different titles, many different hats that you've worn throughout your career. And, the show is centered around entrepreneurs. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more about your origin story and becoming a social entrepreneur, because that sounds like, there was a process to it over the past 20 years. So can you, in the next couple of minutes, can you just walk us through how you arrived here?
Yes, I will try. I had a very emotionally driven, heart-led, I would say, community-minded mom, and very loving and very interested in volunteer service, in changing the world and maintaining a positive attitude about everything. But really seeing her empathy. She was very kinesthetic. Those skills were on all the time. And I had a dad who was very rational and organized in his thinking and business-minded, and really saw how things fit together. So I have those two sides of my brain really intermingled at this point. Yeah. So though I was very much drawn from an early time in my life, volunteering, working with young people in particular, especially high-risk kids, very drawn to that direct service and working in those environments. Over time, the sector in itself started to eat away at me a little bit. The constant chasing for fundraising, the dollars, the operating with so little resources, and that starts to surface this scarcity and martyrdom and, a mindset and a posture that really didn't resonate with me. And so though I did spend a solid 20 years working in that sector, felt like I needed to take all of the good things that I got from those 2 decades in that sector. I needed to really activate my business mind, which was just hungering for a project to put out there in the world in the way that I thought it could be most effective, and make that shift. And there was a pivotal moment for sure, that it was last year that I signed up. I became aware of this really fantastic course workshop called the Alt MBA. So led by Seth Godin, entrepreneur and best-selling author out on the East Coast. And I took the risk and I signed up, and it was a 30-day immersion experience, and I already had this idea and the framework in my mind. And so I used that as the core project for my Alt MBA experience. And it was phenomenal. The people I met, the cohorts, the learning groups, the day-to-day, the projects, the prompts, it stretched us where we were having revelation after revelation, every other day. It was incredible. But it was basically business development and leadership, or I should say business development and marketing, but through a lens of leadership and empathy. And who does that? I mean, who talks about these things in that way? And so that really hit home with me. And I actually, from that experience, was honored to be asked to come on as a student coach. So I've coached several more Alt MBAs over the past year. I've had the opportunity to cross paths with Seth Godin and
That's so cool.
Gain his wisdom. And then several of my fellow coaches have actually become part of my team. So we have a team of 7 that is running PropsperCity right now. Most of them are in advisory roles. I think 5 of us are all Alt MBA graduates and coaches. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And yeah, I think Seth Godin is pretty special. It sounds like his approach was that blend of your parents, right? That kind of rational thinking for your dad, I guess, and your mom, kind of more passion focused, and to bring in empathy in building a business, right? It's almost kind of thinking about your culture, having that kind of emotional and cultural intelligence as you build this amazing, prosperous business, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, one of the things that gets discussed during the Alt MBA is this concept called Sonder. Yeah. It's just, I think there's like an urban dictionary of obscurity or something that tries to give meaning to this word, but it's fascinating. It's just the idea, though, that everyone out there that you pass by is leading a life that's as complex, as rich, as traumatic, as tragic, as joyful, as confusing, as stressful as your life. And that sometimes you're going to be a passerby, like at a coffee shop, at someone else's life that is just as full as yours is. Yeah. And so I like that concept resonates with me in so many different ways, and is in many ways at the core of PropsperCity, because isn't that really what inclusion and equity is about? And diversity also is just recognizing that we're all individuals, that we're all human beings, that we are wrestling with different things, that we have different backgrounds, that we have different privileges, and then finding a way to piece those things together, not to give the same, not to create an equal environment, but to really consider how everyone might need different resources to get where they want to go.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yes. And I think that is definitely a good segue into my next question, which is when you're thinking about your business and culture in particular, you have 7 advisors right now. You're at this amazing place where not only are you thinking about, okay, this is my business revenue model, right? But you're thinking also, what are our values here at PropsperCity, and how do we want to welcome in and create a more equitable workplace ourselves, because we're trying to model that for, especially those kind of big corporations that you want to bring into your job board. How are you leading that way? Like maybe if you can provide one example or two, how you're thinking about this, because I know you're really thoughtful about it. And I think it's going to help some folks who are in that startup phase and might just be, kind of taking care of like that first to-do list item rather than thinking of the big vision.
We spend time thinking about this all the time.
Yeah.
So there are like a handful of core things for me. One is always asking good questions. So every time I feel like I need to tell somebody something, I think about how I can rephrase that as a question and try to draw a response out that can contribute or maybe even alter the decision that we're going to make. And there's all kinds of platforms too. Like we use Slack and we use Zoom. Mm-hmm. So my team are spread all over the U.S. and with a fantastic individual in Canada also. And that's a really nice environment too. We look a little bit like the Brady Bunch on the screen, but it's just a nice way for us to sort of be all at the table together. No one's at the head of the table. No one's, there's no hierarchy in that structure, which is really nice. In our Slack community, which is an online opportunity way for us to converse and talk about things all under one umbrella, we have in the place where you introduce or write your name, we also include our pronouns there. So those show up every time anyone writes anything in that community. So that's a common practice too. And then we are really thoughtful about including people on our team that might not be perfectly versed or deeply educated or have a really core sense of the work we're doing yet, which may sound a little bit odd, but for me, it's part of that process that we as a company are going to learn right alongside the other companies and the other organizations and our community and our society that we're hoping to help transform. So we might have people on our team who don't completely understand how to articulately speak about equity and inclusion. I might be one of them. We're all learning together. So we do have white men on our advisory team, and we do have young people, and we have heterosexual people, and we have all different ages on our group too, which is really phenomenal. Yeah. And we just value that, and it comes with some challenges at times, right? A lot of different perspectives, but it also, in my opinion, makes us a much richer organization. Yeah.
As you're just describing some of the steps that you're taking, this idea of a more flat organization, so non-hierarchical, like the term holarchy is used a lot. And it reminds me of this kind of Zappos model where they'll identify really bright people that have a passion for what the thing is that they're trying to build, right? Or selling shoes. And they allow people to kind of create their own positions, and then they fit them into the organization based if they have the passion and the wherewithal to really support the organization. So it sounds a little similar, right? And having that curiosity too, that's definitely a trait of an inclusive leader. So thanks just for walking through that example, because I think that's helpful for other folks really. Should I be thinking about my culture at the same time as my profit margins? And the answer, in my opinion, is yes. And I think you're a great model for that, just in this beginning stage of what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's become somewhat of a buzzword at this point, but you cannot lose by employing empathy, by flexing those skills, by having a deep understanding of what that word means and what it means to you and how you feel it. And for some people, I've met people who it doesn't come naturally. They don't really even know what that means. But it is, I actually believe it can be a trained skill. Yeah. You can really spend time exploring empathy in your own body and feeling it and having that experience in a community with other people. And once you start realizing that people are coming and you take a minute to be in their shoes, it doesn't mean that you had to have gone through what they went through, but just to really step inside and see it through their eyes with what they have gone through. It's a pretty powerful experience.
Yeah.
And it works great for managing teams, too, which is not an easy job.
Yeah.
Being the boss is not easy.
So I want, no, tell me about it. So Sonder. So that's kind of like pulling in that aspect of empathy into the workplace, right?
Yeah, I think first Sonder, right? Recognizing that everyone's having their own experience of the world and life. And then next, empathy, being willing to like consider another human being and step in their shoes, see it through their lens.
Yeah.
And then how might that change your interaction with them or the possibilities that could roll out?
I love that. Thank you for walking us through that again. I think that's really important. So we're going to take a quick sponsorship break. Hey, Outbosses. Rhodes Perry here. As you all know, part of my passion for this podcast is to empower you and fellow LGBT entrepreneurs to cultivate a feeling of purpose and belonging in your business. To know that you can show up and be the most authentic version of yourself. Purpose, belonging, and workplace culture are concepts I take seriously in my own consulting business. In fact, I'm on a mission to empower leaders just like you and those on their way to joining us to cultivate cultures of belonging. In my upcoming book, Belonging at Work, I share some of my personal struggles of coming out as a trans guy in the workplace and how I leverage this experience as one of my business superpowers. Now, I'm on a mission to support you in taking simple actions that will make a world of difference for anyone who has ever felt as if they needed to hide important aspects of themselves on the job. When you commit to purchasing a special, limited edition copy of the book, a portion of your purchase will support expanding workplace opportunities for fellow transgender and non-binary people. An added bonus, your story about what it means to belong at work will be featured on the book's website to inspire others. You're ready to belong at work now. To learn more, visit Rhodes on Amazon.com or text 444-999 and type the word belong. Again, that's Rhodes on Amazon.com or text 444-999 and type belong. Okay, so we're back into the interview, and Rebecca, now we're going to talk about our rainbow family, our awesome rainbow family. And I like to kick off this part of the interview with probably the hardest question, which is if you can kind of identify a time where it was difficult for you to bring your whole self to work, to be 100% out. This could be in your own business now, thinking about your time in nonprofits. So if something comes to mind, let us know what that is and how you might have worked around it, because I definitely think that it will give our listeners more confidence to show up authentically in their own work.
Great question. Hard question, but great question. You know, if you'd seen photos of me from when I was a kid, there would have been no question.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, I'm slow to the game on this, honestly. I have found ways through a lot of my life for different reasons to pass, I guess is the term, as heterosexual or as who knows, but not clear. And I found myself through my career also leveraging that reality when working with boards of directors, when seeking funds, when managing people, that sometimes it was just easier. It felt like for me to not have the conversation, for me to not talk to folks about that part of me. And then there was a similarly confusing time when there is a lot of societal pressure and pressure from our nonprofit funders and that sort of thing, too, to be actually a more diverse organization, especially here in Portland. And so I found myself leveraging my identity in a new way to actually be more out and open in those circles. And what I found myself really up until recently feeling is that this part of my identity actually didn't feel really part of me, like in a genuine, authentic way, because I had found the need or decided there was a need to leverage it almost in a political way or in a fundraising way, in a management way, in different ways that it just felt like this thing over here. And it was really recently, I would say, both in terms of becoming an entrepreneur, but also in just really sitting and evaluating and allowing myself to think through, and also just getting older, right? We theoretically get wiser as we get older. Just coming to terms with the fact that this is really who I am, and the rest of it doesn't matter. So it was just a week ago when I was at a YNPN Portland event speaking on a panel, and I introduced myself. I put my pronouns out there, preferred pronouns, and I said, and I also identify as a queer woman. And I was taken aback by the fact that I led with that.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting, Rhodes, you asked me about this podcast almost a year ago, I think. And I hemmed and hawed, and I was like, I kind of used the excuse of I don't feel like I have a project yet to really talk about. But, if I really get real with myself about that, I didn't feel comfortable identifying as an out entrepreneur publicly. And that was just a year ago. This is crazy.
This is awesome.
45 years old.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Perhaps today I'm coming out on your show, right?
Welcome.
I am an out entrepreneur.
Welcome. Yes. Say it again.
And it's okay. And it's okay.
Yeah.
And I like it. And so I'm really embodying for the first time, I think, in a really, really authentic way, this idea that I get to do me.
Yeah.
That this is actually that me like this is the best me. And it really empowers me to do the work that I want to do out there in a world that is just so much more authentic.
I love that response.
Well,
it's real. I feel like, yes, I'm feeling the hearts and the love. So yeah, thank you for that. And you just crushed that question. So I think this next one is going to be, I'm just going to embracing myself here because I think it's going to be a lot of awesomeness. The show is definitely about empowerment. I really like to amplify, or for my guests to really share their experiences of or thoughts about what it means to have a superpower, right? An LGBT superpower that's gleaned from our lived experiences that we can leverage in business. And I'm sure you've thought about this as well. And so I'm curious, especially in your bio, you talked a lot about resiliency. I don't know if that's your superpower, but I'm curious, what is your take? Do you think that there are even superpowers that come from a lived experience of being a part of the Rainbow family? And if so, do they help us in business?
Yes, I believe in superpowers for sure. And I think that everybody gets to have their own superpowers. And that's actually part of what's important, is to know what your personal superpower is and how you find a way to explore that and use it and engage it for good. For me, that superpower looks a lot like me doing me. Just understanding that the more honest, the more truthful I can be about who I am and what I have to say and what I have to contribute in the world, understanding that will come with judgments, right? But I think that ultimately the net gain of being your true self, as authentically as you can, saying the things that you feel and the way that you feel them, really trying to break out of that mold, not assign labels, just really find you, that is the most powerful superpower. Isn't that what we're here, is just to be ourselves and then to find something to do with that, to find people to love with that, to make good things happen in the world.
Yeah. I think that is coming out in this interview time and time again, where you're just answering these questions so authentically, which I love, and you're in alignment with what you're doing in your business, right? And I think that's a blessing, and I wish that for everyone who's listening to the show, and hopefully you're on the path in working towards getting there, or you're already there. And if you're already there, talk to me. I'd love to have you on the show so you can share your story too. Considering, some of the challenges that you had with, covering different aspects of being a part of the Rainbow family when you were working largely in the nonprofit sector, and where you're at now, where, you are doing yourself, you're showing up authentically. What would you want our listeners to kind of take away from this segment of the interview, for them to show up more authentically in their own work, whether they're, working for someone else right now, or they're just, they're in their own business?
Yeah, I feel like in some ways I answered that in the previous question. It's hard to see past the idea, but I'll add another layer to that, though. Thanks for this question. It's, in addition to, I think, understanding and allowing yourself the freedom to be who you are, there's also a need, I think, to get a sense of your purpose and then to bring those two things together. So, because I don't think that they're one and the same. Being who you are out in the world is also how you talk about things, how you express yourself, how you care, how you contribute, your personality, your communication. But for me, all of that is sort of a flow out from this sense of purpose about what you're actually here to do. And so I think that sounds really big, and a lot of people are like, you've been so lucky to know what your purpose is. But the truth is that I I don't know that I've always known what my purpose is. Like, I put myself out there and I meet people and I learn things and I try new projects and I volunteer and I take workshops and I start to, from those experiences, shape kind of these core values, right, of who I am and what I think is probably the best way for me personally to contribute to the world. And so did I ever think that I would necessarily start a job board as like my purpose? Like, no, absolutely not. But do I feel certain that part of my role here in the world is to be an advocate and a vessel and a motivator and a contributor around equality and equity and making people feel more at home in the world being themselves? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the good stuff right there.
Yeah. And it's just a start, right? Like, it's the more you kind of keep showing up and, you know, you have clarity, and you're only going to get more clarity by getting that feedback of like, this is amazing. Have you thought of doing this other aspect with PropsperCity? And you're like, no, but thank you. That's added, you know, another layer to where you're at right now. And I've definitely seen that in my own business where I'm like, I think this is where I'm going. And it's just the more that you consistently show up, it just, there's things that you couldn't even imagine had you not even got the momentum to start, right? So you had the courage to just, you know, begin, and that's huge.
Well, I think that folks either get caught in this sort of wandering around aimlessly, not having any idea what they want to do, and that becomes the story. Yeah. Or they're like, this is my finite goal purpose. I am there, and this is it. And anything that takes me off this ramp must not be right. And now that's my story, and I'm also struggling.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the middle there is like, I think, an acceptance of the reality that purpose is not finite. It is not an end goal. It is like something inside you that you need to just like open yourself up a little bit to let it surface and sort of trickle up, right? Like, it's already in you. Mm-hmm. And then allow it to evolve over time, because you're an evolving human being. Yeah. All the things that you care about and feel, like, those are going to evolve right alongside it. But to just stay aware then.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes me think, I feel like I've said this before in the show, so sorry. It feels trite. Like, you know, when you meditate, there's this this phrase of thinking like the bow and arrow, but like when you're tightening the bow, you don't want it to be too tight and you don't want it to be too loose. And it's kind of like that in business, right? Where you don't want to be too rigid of like, this is my only purpose and I'm never going to deviate from this path. And vice versa, you don't want to be all over the map where you don't have kind of that thread of like, in my heart, this is what I feel my purpose is. And I'm not quite sure where that will lead with my work, but I'm gonna keep showing up and keep trying, right?
You will find the work if you have a sense of the purpose.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, and you will also find your purpose if you go after the work.
Yes.
Like, they go together.
Yeah, that's totally true. So one last question on this thread of our rainbow family, and it's kind of recognizing that there's lots of inequities within our communities, especially when it comes to, you know, kind of economic justice. And I'm curious, you know, as you build out PropsperCity, as it becomes more prosperous for you, what are ways that you are thinking about giving back to LGBT communities? Is that a part of your kind of social good mission? And if so, what does that look like? Or has your team thought about that?
Well, one of the ways that I think that I can contribute best at this point is to not hide anymore, right? Yeah. And if I could go back and do over those last 20 years, or the last 10 in particular, where I was in positions of leadership and management and have been able to be more open and confident, when I think about all of the young people I was working with and how that could have been an inspiration or a comfort to them to also become more open. Boy, I wish I could do that again. And so for sure, my responsibility, in my opinion now, is to keep being that person I now am and to continue to talk out loud and to be honest and open and to be myself, but to not hide from the fact that my being queer is part of me.
Yeah.
So that's a big piece there. And then in terms of contributing back to the community in a bigger way, absolutely. I mean, when I think about generating wealth through PropsperCity and growing this company, one of the things actually that I learned a lot about when I was in the alt MBA was this idea of opportunity cost, right? And I had some coaches and some peers in that environment who were like, have you really looked at the cost, though, of not getting this project out into the world and then allowing it to become big? So it's like, oh, I don't want one of those crazy vertical growth companies with an exit plan and investors. Like, that seems too hard. And and big, and they're like, okay, I hear what you're saying, but what if that actually is the best way to change the culture, is to allow your company to get that big? I thought, wow. And they were putting it in numbers. Like, so there's potential cost to your family and your close community. Maybe there's cost to Portland if you don't get this opportunity out into the world. But what about those millions of other people that need this service, that need this culture to shift in this way? And I, got a real sense of the responsibility then. So I was like, okay. So one of the ways that made me feel better about the idea of generating potentially a whole lot of wealth is that I would then have the power to put that wealth back into our community.
Yes.
So, some people might dream of having a fancy car, a jet plane. I actually, after 20 years working in the nonprofit community, feel like I know where some cash could be infused in places that could have a dramatic impact on the community.
Yes.
And I know a lot of those organizations, and I would be honored and excited, including in the LGBTQ community, to be able to contribute that money back in. So those are just small ways.
Do you think that might be a part of what PropsperCity does in terms of kind of guidance around kind of social good and investing back into communities?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the end game
awesome.
right there for me.
Yeah.
Just shifting the culture in all sorts of ways. So we're going to work on this one thing that's going to shift workplace culture, and then what rolls out from that and the ripple effects from that, and our ability then to contribate back into the community financially and otherwise. It's just like that's
I love it.
Exciting stuff.
I love it. This is super. This is amazing. I love this interview. There's a lot of mindset questions that I have, and I guess, this is a huge project that you're undertaking, and so I guess the biggest question around mindset is just on imposter complex, which we've talked about before offline. I'm curious for you, how did you work around, the feelings of this project is huge. Who am I to be the one that leads it? I'm not ready. I'm not good enough. All the stories that we tell ourselves. Did those thoughts come up for you? And if so, how do you manage them? Because I feel like that might be an ongoing thing. I don't know. I know that I struggle with that. So
I metaphorically, in terms of dealing with imposter syndrome, I metaphorically carry around with myself what I call a gentle machete.
Oh,
so
I've never heard this before. Sounds scary.
I actually have the nickname in certain circles is the gentle machete. But it's, it's maybe that's it's not my superpower, but it's certainly my superpower weapon, is to point it in that direction. And for me, what that gentle machete represents is the reality that this is going to be hard, right? Yeah. And it's hard for everyone. And frankly, it's something that I like, starting a business, being an entrepreneur, finding your way out into the world without all of the structure and funding and regular funding resources is a really big challenge. And one of the best things that I can do to combat that imposter syndrome is to spend more time with more people. So sometimes I actually, when I'm feeling like this is the hardest and I have the biggest amount of self-doubt going on right now, that the best thing I could go do is something really hard, which is to go do a podcast interview or go have a sales meeting with an employer. Because actually it's in those conversations that I find myself really activated again, and seeing how what we're talking about and the change we're trying to make resonates with other people. And then that also gives me a deeper sense of how it's resonating with me. And then I feel like, oh, I can do this. And not only can I do this, but I'm the person to do this. Yeah. And really that always comes down to spending more time with more people and hearing their stories and understanding that, oh, that's right. Like a senior director at that really big company that we've all heard of, also has similar fears and also has similar concerns and is also trying to figure out how to make their way in the world doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
So we're kind of like all in this together.
Yeah. Yeah.
In some ways.
I love this visual of the gentle machete. And for any visual artists out there, just kind of can see you as the superhero with your cape and the machete, kind of like the thought bubbles of the self-doubt. You're kind of popping them left and right. And I think that's brave. I mean, I think that's where the magic happens, is when you're like, all right, I'm afraid, I'm not sure about this, but I'm still going to do it. And you do it. And you keep showing up and you do that. And it's good for all of us to remember that we have to step into those spaces. One other question for you on this topic, mindset and just kind of showing up and doing the work, is when you get stuck, right, and you need help, is that hard for you to ask for help? And if it is, and you move beyond that because you have your gentle machete, who are the kind of go-to people that you have? Do you have mentors? Do you have a mastermind? Do you call Seth Godin?
Hello, Seth.
Yes.
I do not have a hard time asking for help. And that is genetic coding that I think came from my mom predominantly. But there is definitely a feeling inside of me that it is not a bad thing or a weak thing to ask for help. And then, of course, I've built up a lifetime of results of real life evidence that says when you ask for help, you often get it, and it's helpful. Or it's not, and you learn from that too. So it was helpful also in that situation. But I think that in terms of having coaches and mentors, and I'm also part of my genetic coding is constant and never-ending improvement, right? Like wanting to professionally develop, wanting to take workshops, wanting to be in the alt MBA, continue to learn and have folks around me. But I will also say you have to be careful because it's a trapping in itself, right? Because I think at the end of the day, to be a successful entrepreneur, to go out there to make significant change in the world, you have to have the courage to jump off that cliff and do it. And I don't think you actually get that from coaching or mentoring or workshops. Like, you don't get that core inside thing where you have that courage to be able to go forward. So it was one of the most interesting things I heard not that long ago. Probably from Seth Godin. He said, you won't feel overwhelmed or burdened or unable to get where you're going if you have the courage to just focus on that one thing, like to get really clear on the one thing that you need to do right now to make the greatest change that you can. It's not going to be easy, right? So that's the other piece, is remembering that courage is a feeling, an experience that is not always pleasurable. So,
no.
Right. So to accept that it comes with pain and that it's necessary to move forward and that you've got to keep going. And for whatever happens, don't quit.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you can quit, right? There's some good things to quitting also. Sometimes you have to pivot and make a new decision. But in those hard moments when you know that this is the thing you're supposed to be doing, but it just hurts so bad,
yes,
don't quit.
Yes.
Keep going.
Yeah, yeah. I like what you're saying on all this. And I love that you're not afraid to ask for help, and that's a place of strength, that you position that. And then also not to use kind of coaching or, workshops and just kind of getting ready to get ready. We had a guest on the show a while back, Rhonda Adair, who said that. Stop getting ready to get ready.
Rhonda.
Yeah. It's like this, do it, and keep learning, as you go along. So I think that's great advice. We're now going into our bonus round where we'll get the chance to get to know Rebecca just a little bit better, gain some insights on how we can bring our whole selves to work, and then learn one way that we can stay in touch with Rebecca after today's conversation. All right, Rebecca, are you ready for some quick fire questions?
I guess so.
Yeah. Okay.
I can do it.
Yes, you can totally do this. Finish the sentence. As an out boss, I believe.
I believe in... Okay, well, first of all, let me just say that my partner, who's a woman, Kennedy, advised me to, whenever possible in my interviews, turn something into song, like musical style.
Yes.
So what first came to my mind was, I believe I can fly.
Yes, I love it.
I believe I can touch the sky. Okay, I don't sing well. But ultimately, yes, it's to be me. I believe that being me is the best me I can be. I also get a rhyme. This is great. Okay.
I think, you've got it. You've got it. And it's, I think it's like when you are authentic, you lift that weight off yourself, of trying to conform to other people's ideas. And you do you elevate, you fly, right? Maybe? Yeah,
absolutely. And if you really want to be specific in what it is about, like being an out entrepreneur, that really is, it's also being the best queer me, right? Like it's really like being clear about who I am in all of those areas and not hiding anymore. I'm totally done hiding.
Yeah. Stop hiding.
You can't fly if you're hiding.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay. So do you have a mantra or a quote that you reference that helps you stay motivated in your business, especially when it gets hard?
Just reminding myself it's going to be hard. This is hard. It's okay that it's hard.
Yes.
So that helps. And also just get it out there. So ship it, right? Go. Like let it be out there in the world.
Yeah. I think that's real. And it's hard, but you got to do it. You got to do the work. So can you share one personal habit that helps you master yourself in your business?
Oh, I love listening to music. That helps a lot. And then the personal habit of connecting with people, strange as maybe that sounds, but that is a habit of mine that I have employed time and again with great success, which is reach out, reach out, reach out. Not just about asking for help, but be generous, be generous. How can you be helpful to someone else?
Yeah.
If it hurts right now and you're like, you're balled up and you're sitting at your desk and your imposter syndrome's going on, like, what is the best thing I could do right now is to be generous toward another human being. And if that's a habit, I'll take it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that idea of giving back is one of the things that I think for me gives me life too, where it's like, I can help, because sometimes it's, I think definitely, you're not interviewing me. So it's hard for me to ask for help. So I'm just being real there. Can you name one thing that you readily delegate in your business to stay focused on what you're good at?
Oh, did I mention that we need some volunteers and some support and that we are, so, because right now I don't get to delegate a whole lot, though I do have an amazing team. I mean, I think that my strong suit is being able to talk about the work that we're doing, to be able to sell that, but also just through to be able to effectively communicate it, which fortunately, hopefully will end up in sales for our company. And so if I could pretty much delegate everything else, that would be great.
Yes.
But right now, I'm not a solo entrepreneur, but I am a solo founder right now who just moments ago launched a company. Yeah. And so there aren't a whole lot of staff people to delegate anything to yet.
Oh, I feel that.
You're cheering for me right there.
Yes, yeah. So we'll put a call to action on the show notes for you.
Awesome.
Okay, so 2 more questions for you. Can you share one piece of advice to inspire the next generation of outbosses to take that first entrepreneurial leap?
Well, if it's right for you to be an entrepreneur, then absolutely be an entrepreneur. And what I can say for sure is that the time will never feel right. So don't wait. Yes. Go do it. But for me, everything that is good for me as an entrepreneur stems from the relationships I have and the networks that I have developed. And I'm not talking about going to kind of soulless networking events and handing out business cards. I'm talking about having real conversations with real people about the work that we're doing and about the work that they're doing and how those things might work together. So for me, it's all about, you cannot start a company in a silo. You just can't. Yep. There's just no way. And you will need volunteers to help you get off. Yeah. You will have things to delegate. So just building up that community, building up that network, that's the golden stuff right there.
It definitely takes a village to get these things off the ground.
100%.
So, very, very important reminder. So Rebecca, thank you so much for your time and for inspiring fellow outbosses. As a next step, can you share where we can find you? Just one place, the best place to find you online.
Well, please come on over to the website. Yeah. It's www.PropsperCity.org. And there's opportunities to sign up there to get our emails. We have a bunch of jobs posted already. You can check those out. If you're an employer, we would love for you to post jobs on our site. If you need a little funding support to make that happen as we get going through the summer here, shoot me an email and I'll send you a coupon code.
Awesome.
PropsperCity.org, that's where we're hanging out.
Awesome. Well, you've got 30,000 bosses listening who have businesses of their own who might be looking for people to employ. So definitely take advantage of that, folks. And I will include that in the show notes. So outbosses, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode. It's always my privilege to connect with you and so many inspiring outbosses like Rebecca. So for details from today's conversation, you can go to the website, outentrepreneur.com, or you can text 444-999 and type outboss to stay in touch with the show. So definitely subscribe to the show. Consider leaving a rating and review in iTunes. That's the best way to get the show known and share it with friends and loved ones. And of course, for now, keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.